And I think we're live.
It says live on the little thing. So
great excitement. Okay, now I'm going to test and see if it's because I recently, don't tell Hanselman or Damien. Yeah, there it is.
I'm sure they'll never know.
I recently started the thing up and forgot to actually like post the link or whatever, and people couldn't see it. And I think my crime is covered. Everybody see it? 5 by 5. Thank you, Michael. All right, we are on the money. So this is awesome. We've got Glenn and Mike.
Hello.
And you folks are here to talk to us today about the HTTP REPL.
Yeah, that's right. We're here to talk to you about that.
And as you told me, you were madly coding to show off new stuff late last night, and even as we were setting up this morning, you were.
We may or may not have rebuilt twice whilst we've been sitting here for the show.
This is exciting. I think this is what the stand-up is about. It's
and I may be like pulling and building and getting a new version to run right now before I get to share my screen.
That's awesome. That is one of the main reasons that the community link section of the show exists.
So just so that we can get other people to get ready.
just for that reason.
I like it.
All right, let's do it. So let me go and share my screen. I'm sharing my screen, and I need to lock on me. Okay, everything. So yeah, cool. Edge has this exciting thing, which I haven't decided if I like yet or not, but it shows every single tab as a new window, which for like a tabaholic like me is not very handy. It's a lot of windows to alt tab through. Cool. All right, let's start with Shane Boyer. So Shane Boyer he's been doing a ton of stuff behind the scenes. We've had this workshop we've talked about we've been doing this for years now. This is a workshop that we built, Damien, David Fowler, myself, a lot of people. There's almost 400 commits on this thing. So this is a workshop where we build a conference planner, including some different parts. There's a web API backend. There's a .NET standard DTO library. There's a front end. We've got a JavaScript services front end, all kinds of stuff. So we've gone through and built this out, and there's actually there's a single page app front end thing that Shane updated to use the Angular CLI front end update stuff. We have deploying to Docker and Helm, all kinds of good things in there. One thing that we do in order to make it so that people can follow along, not get lost, if something breaks, you can recover from it, is we have these save points. So not only is there the kind of final source code, but there's also these save points all along the way for, here's where you should be as you finish up this chapter. And one difficulty with that is that every time there's an update, like say, 2.1 RC comes out, 2.1 preview 1, preview 2, release come out, etc. We need to update those and we need to test them all out. So what Shane did is he went through and hooked this all up. This is cool. So what's going on here is that he's actually hooked this up with VSTS, and there are builds going on for all of for the front end and the back end, but there's also builds going on for the save points for each chapter, which is huge. So he actually goes through in this. He talks about how he's pulling the source code from GitHub and doing multiple builds for all the different things. So this includes all these save points.
Right.
So yeah, so I recommend this, especially if your project has more than one project. If you've got a GitHub release going on and you've got a more complicated build, this is really cool how we went through and did this. This is using all the kind of newest stuff on VSTS build. So two takeaways here. One is continue to use this workshop. We got a lot of great stuff here. And 2 is Shane is awesome. And 3 is here's how he showed off how to do all this cool VSTS build.
Nice work. Nice work, Shane.
Yeah. So speaking of build, Andrew Locke has gone through and shown off the new stuff with AppVeyor and Linux builds. So AppVeyor has had support for Windows builds for a long time. They recently added in support for Linux builds as well. And so Andrew goes through and shows out shows off how to, you can start with an AppVeyor YAML file, and this defines your build. So you can go into AppVeyor and you can kind of click through the settings and configure a build. But the real kind of nice way to do it that's people can do pull requests on and can see what you're doing and all that kind of stuff is using a YAML file to define things. And so he shows how to do that. Here's his YAML. He shows how to set that up. But then he goes in and says, how to make it work on Linux as well. So here's he's picking the Ubuntu image, he's updating his build script, etc. And then here's a nice thing as well is the conditional artifact deployment. So you can say, here's out of these different things I'm building, here's what I want to actually deploy. So
nice.
Good stuff. All right, big beefy article from Anthony Chu on real-time applications with ASP.NET Core SignalR. Yeah, so we've had blog posts and docs and things showing ASP.NET Core SignalR. Anthony goes into some really good detail, showing some things like starting with what it is and talking about the JavaScript library. Again, an advantage recently is it doesn't require jQuery, so it can work with it but doesn't require it. So it goes through and talks about all the kind of basic stuff, and then builds up to some things, including some neat things like, presence. He shows deploying to Azure. He shows things like app reconnection. So, kind of you can see from the scroll bar, this is a big article. So this is in the latest Code magazine and also available online.
Awesome.
Cool. All right, two from Damien Bowden. Were you talking to me or are you talking to your build and cursing at it?
Said good to see more SignalR stuff happening.
Oh, yeah. Yep, cool. So two from Damien Bowden on Bootstrap 4. So this is one showing how he's configured it using Webpack and TypeScript and NPM. So kind of basically showing here's how to set up a build. Webpack, not something I'm super familiar with. So this is cool to see as he's kind of walking through and showing how he's got this set up. And as always, Damien always ends up his posts with, here's where you can grab the stuff on GitHub as well. So cool stuff. And here he's also done one showing updating ASP.NET Core identity to use Bootstrap 4. So this is showing, updating the ASP.NET Core identity stuff and showing it using Bootstrap 4 as well. Cool. All right. So here's our last community one. This is Travis, and he's showing this is a deep dive into Microsoft configuration. So this is the config stuff that everything in ASP.NET Core runs on. So he starts with the basics on, everything's key value.
I had a look at this one. It was great.
It's really, this is like a mini book basically here. So this is really cool. Going through, building up all the different providers. I'm actually going to skip way down to the end and show kind of his key takeaways. So he shows all the things about, it's all key value. He talks about where things are pulled from and overridden. Talks about some things like you may not expect, like validation and stuff.
It shows something actually that I'm not sure I've ever actually talked to anybody using in real life, which is the ordinal array syntax for configuration.
Yeah. Yep.
No, you don't know about that? It's great. You should read his blog post.
Yep. Yeah. So tons of stuff in there. Yeah, the ordinal array, and is that the one where you're talking about the kind of with the separators, the path separators?
It's so that you can basically put a collection. You can put a collection like an array into your config file, and then get keys with the index in, so you can go to kind of 0 or 1 or 2 to be able to pull individual elements out of an array inside your config data.
Let me see if I can search
for override like the nth element of an array inside your JSON thing. You could do that, for example.
Oh, cool. Let's see. Wow, there it is. Ordinal collection.
Yeah, which I'm not sure I've ever actually. I don't know if anybody ever actually has used, but it was a really cool feature. Cool.
All right. So the last one I'm going to end on is this one here. So this is, we're talking to you, our community stand-up watchers that are kind of watching all the latest check-ins and okay with all the newest late breaking stuff and all that. So this is this is kind of a advanced look at the roadmap for ASP.NET Core 2.2, right?
Yep.
So I don't know, Glenn, if there's anything you want to talk about in here. This is out there. It's issue 307.
Yeah, like it's out there. There is a link. There is links to talk. So a bunch of you have already found and talked about this at various various issues around GitHub. We put as much detail as I put as much detail in it as I had at the time. The things that don't have much detail because we don't know what we're doing. So you should take that kind of into account. There's an issue to go talk to us in general about the release, and then there is 2.2 milestones with issues assigned, and you can go look through the repos and talk about it. But if you have questions or want to talk about any of the stuff that's on here, reach out to me or go log issues or talk on the home repo issue that's linked to this thing.
Cool.
I think it makes sense. There's kind of an arc. There's kind of an arc of what we're trying to achieve here. There's a lot of focus on APIs and getting and generating metadata like Swagger metadata from APIs.
Okay. And, I got this information as quickly as anyone else could. I subscribed to this repo here. So this ASP.NET announcements. Mm-hmm. And before I got any emails or anything internal at Microsoft, I saw this going out here. So if you want to keep an eye on what's going on, this ASP.NET announcements repo, I believe it has information. Yeah. So you can just watch this repo and you'll see all the kind of top announcements as they go out.
I also, I think Ben Adams actually retweeted the bot that tweeted from the announcement repo before I was able to move my cursor from where I clicked go on the announcement to Twitter to be able to click tweet on my own tweet saying that it was available.
That's just beautiful. Yep.
So, if you follow Ben Adams, you would have seen him retweet it probably.
Okay. And someone already asked in the chat, can I get a link to these? And I will share that link out in just a second. And then we put that in the show description as well. Yeah, Jonathan,
health checks appears to be the feature we love to cut every release, but hopefully this time.
All right. Cool.
Yeah. So there's another. So is that all the stuff that you?
That's all I had for this week. Yeah.
Yeah. Guys, I really needed you to give me
You wanted more?
An extra just like one more blog post would have been great.
We just rebuilt.
But anyway,
Well, if you want, I can point to. So some of the stuff you're showing is with this HTTP REPL thing, right?
Absolutely. You did a talk about it, right?
Yeah. So there was, I did a talk, and it was based a lot basically from Build. There was a talk where Hanselman and Hunter did, right?
Yeah. So I linked to that. I linked to the moment where they start in the announcement blog post where we talk about the HTTP REPL. I link to the minute where Hunter and Hanselman start talking about the REPL in the Build talk. So if you guys are interested in seeing the first kind of prototype of this that we saw at Build, you can go check that out by clicking that link.
Yep. So I've got that is right here. That is this YouTube blah blah blah, and there it is right there. So this was really cool. And then I worked with you on a talk I gave recently where I went through and got this set up and ran it. It's exciting stuff.
Well, you'll be happy to know that nothing you learned is true anymore.
That's part of the fun of my job. Everything I learn is completely disposable information.
All right. So I guess everybody can probably see us at the moment. So background for those of you who might not have followed along with some of the growth of this kind of REPL tool that we're going to talk about now. I've been talking about it on and off for a while with various internal prototypes, trying to convince people that it was a cool idea. We had the .NET Tools kind of experience drop, which allowed us to actually ship something like this. And at the MVP Summit, a lot of MVPs got really excited, which gave me more kind of momentum to be able to get something done. And then I hacked together a prototype over the course of a couple of nights, showed it around at the MVP Summit. MVPs got excited. My Hunter thought it was a great idea. And then we kind of went from there to where we were showing that same prototype from the MVP Summit at Build. Then once we decided it was a great idea, I had to have somebody with some amount of engineering talent like Mike Lebetsky here to my left, to, productize said demo, which meant, making sure it could actually build, because turns out my repo didn't build by the time he got back from parental leave. Add unit tests. Actually, in reality, he rewrote. He wrote one unit test. Yeah. In reality, he basically started from scratch with just the kind of command list that I had implemented, and said, okay, let's go. How would we build this REPL? And so it's kind of broken into a couple of parts now. You have a kind of almost a library for building REPLs, a kind of infrastructure for if you were to build some other type of REPL loop that you would need, and then a HTTP implementation of that. But let's jump in, and I'll share my screen, and then avoid the inceptionness. So here, if you can see, I'll wait for John to say, yeah, I can see.
I see it. It says disconnected.
It says disconnected. So I've run the REPL locally, and it doesn't have anything to connect to. So what I have on this machine is a standard values controller. All I did was add Swashbuckle to it, so that I had a Swagger doc, and I didn't bump up my fonts in Visual Studio, and Hanselman will be most disappointed. So what we can do here, the way this REPL works, it's centered around base addresses. So unlike curl or something like that, we expect you to be like running your REPL against some kind of site that you have running. It's designed to try and increase the productivity around being able to go and fire up your API. And today, if you were to go into Visual Studio and you go make an API and you press F5, it opens a browser with a 404, probably, right? Maybe if you're lucky, it'll take you to the actual kind of endpoint of one of the controllers or something, and you'll be able to see some text.
Right, because by default, when you would run a project, it would just, the default route would be the index home or whatever, right?
Right, which doesn't exist in the default route. In the template that we create by default doesn't actually have anything on it. And so what we wanted to say, so then if you want to debug your kind of get or your post or something in your application, so the example that we used to give all the time was like, how do I functions? How do I hit a breakpoint here on my controller, right? Like, how do I hit this? Was the canonical question, right? How do I hit that? And you could kind of hit that from a browser, and then you go, if you know the URI, it's fine. And then the next question was, okay, but how do I hit like this guy?
Right, and then we say, you have to get Postman or whatever it is, right?
Or jump onto the command line. You get curl. You use wget. Like you use some side, or maybe even Fiddler. Or you might go and create a unit test project, or add a unit test to your unit test project that just makes requests against your app, so that you can like debug and run and test and explore your application. So we wanted to try and not like replace Postman or any of those tools, but we believe if you kind of had a Venn diagram, there is a set of super common things that you want from several tools that we believe we could put into a CLI experience that would give you a bunch of common features, a bunch of kind of your common tasks would be able to be done by without having to reach for the more advanced tools or the more automated tools, if that makes sense. So first problem we talked about was, well, how do I know what I want to get? So we said, all right, if this using Swagger metadata from here, we've tried to discover if you've got a Swagger doc. If you do, then we will go through that document, the OpenAPI doc, to find what routes you have, because your document should have them, which means you can LS, and it's LSing basically the routes that are available from this document. So
does this have my feature request from when I gave my talk where it auto discovers that?
Yeah, it does. That's
awesome.
Right. Yeah. And then so now I can use this similar to a file system. I can CD into API, or I could CD into values, and then I know it needs an ID. So if I said just get, it would execute a get request against the /APIs/values route and show me the result, right? Or if I was to like pop back up to the base, if I just did get, well, now it just did get against slash. But as we said earlier, the default template we set up doesn't have anything on slash and that's why the browser returns a 404 when you first browse to it. But if I was to type, say, get API / values, then I could get some values, right? Or I could get value 1, right? And it would return me the one value. Or you can then CD into CD value, say get 1, right?
Cool.
And then get 1 and see that. And then we said, okay, well, there's a few other cool things. Like we know that this values API that we're currently putting around here also does post. So what if we said you could do post, and then it said, okay, here's your post. What do you want to post to it? And then you could maybe, I don't know, put some JSON in here.
Oh, wow.
I don't know what this API accepts, but let's put something in there, and then it'll post that data. Turns out my data was invalid, but so the idea here is you can press say post or put. We will pop a browser. One of the features that we'll add here will be if you have given us, so everything I've described, the get and the post and all of these basic HTTP verbs, you can use them without OpenAPI docs, but you have to know and type all the URIs. You can't see, you can CD around if you know them, but you can't LS because we don't know what they are to list them for you.
Right.
And so you can CD arbitrary stuff. It's really just adding things onto the end of your path, and you can try whatever you want, right? So I could like CD up here, and I could say go back to the root, and I could say CD John, and then type get, and it tries to get John because like whatever, man.
Yeah, I'm not found.
You're not found. John's not found, right? So the idea is you can use the REPL completely without any OpenAPI docs. But if you add OpenAPI data, well, now we know about your routes. We can let you LS around. We can let you explore your application, and then you can CD in and out, and you can do gets and posts and puts and all the standard HTTP verbs against your app. And then when you do something that requires data, we will let you do it in line, but also pop an editor. In this case, you can. What is the command for this? Set. We have completion in here, right? Set C. This is command completion, by the way. I was looking for the thing to set the editor.
Pref set.
Pref set. So in here you can set the editor that you want to like a command to the command to the exe that you're going to run that is your editor. So in Mike's case, he runs like Sublime or Notepad++. When he does a push, in my case, it opens up VS Code. It's similar to kind of the GitHub model of I'm going to configure an editor that I'm going to use to edit these to do these posts. And what we hope to do is we have your Swagger doc, which has kind of JSON schema in it. So we hope to be able to pre-populate that file with JSON that is already valid to be able to be sent to the endpoint that you can just tweak and then hit send on. Right. So imagine being able to say post, and then in the post it'll have this will already be pre-populated with some key, right, some value or whatever you want. Right. It'll be similar to what you see in Swagger UI when you open up Swagger UI and you can see example JSON. We'll probably put something that looks very similar to that in the file by default so that you can just tweak it and go.
Just edit the file and then
just edit and go. Yeah, it'll be like, here's a valid JSON. If you just click go, we'll send this, but it probably has all the values empty or something, and you just type in values, but otherwise the structure is all there and ready for you. All right.
Cool.
Let me remind myself what else we've done in here. There's an echo on and off, so you can kind of we by default just get you. We show you a set of a few header values, and you can turn echo on to be able to get more data. There is set headers. So if you set header foo bar,
So
right?
last lesson had actually added tab completion for header values, so you see all the common headers as you tab through.
Really?
Yeah.
Okay, so if I say set header and then go, ooh, look at that. Look at that.
Whoa.
It's me hitting tab. Right?
Thanks, Wikipedia.
Thanks, Wikipedia. Right, okay, so what sort of header do we want to set? If I said accept, if I said user agent, right? And I set it to John.
Yes.
Yeah, and then I say get. So now I've sent the user agent. If I do echo on, do I see that or not? I don't, right?
You see request headers.
Yeah. And so now you can see
Nice.
user agent is John, and that header will be sent on all requests for this session because I've set this kind of global header to be able to be set, right? And then if I do something like then if I kill this, and I do like, I was actually running from Mike's branch, Mike's C/logs. And then I'm going to run my command, which for those of you who can see the branch can tell that it is about logs. So now I'm just running straight from our GitHub repo, whereas before I was running from a tool that I had kind of built and pre-packed, but that's fine. Let me clear set base HTTP localhost : what was my URL? What was my port again? I keep forgetting, and I keep forgetting to leave it in my clipboard 59886 because that's because I've Control F5'd in Visual Studio, so it's running IIS.
Yeah.
So if I do get and then I do cd API values and I type get and I type get1 or something like that, I get value. Then if I come back here and I do something like, I don't know, throw new exception. I don't know what's wrong. I don't know what's wrong. But it's John's fault.
Safe.
That's a pretty safe statement to make. I think, yeah, probably be okay. Right. So if I was to do that, and then come back over here and run my get and run my get1 again, eventually, assuming I have actually Control F5 for this guy, function key, then what we should see over here is that my application will it will crash, right? I'll get a 500, which is what I've got here now, 500 for my app. So then I can do something like type logs. And if I type the logs command, which was only in my branch because I implemented it last night, then I get all of the logs from my application, including, in this case, I don't know what's wrong, but it's John's fault. I get my exception message. Wow. I get a stack trace for where the exception took place. And I can see each of my get and requests coming in. Now, what I'm trying to do here is, you've already got the full kind of dump of logs for your application. So this isn't that, right? This is not everything that your app could see. It's a bit hard. It's hard to tell here because all of my font size is so big that it's kind of skewed a little bit. But what my intent to do here is I was going to indent logs for requests. So what you'll start to see is something like request start, and then all log messages that are within this request will be like indented a little bit, so you'll be able to tell which logs are for which request. It maintains kind of 30 odd log messages, so it's only the last kind of few that you see. We'll probably do special syntax coloring, right? Like this string will probably parse out. So the URI is a different color to the get, to the HTTP verb. We know the types of logs that you're going to be getting from a .NET application. So we can special case a bunch of them. We can play around and like try and make them super usable to really focus in on the pieces of information that you care about. And then for when the things, and then for everything else, you've already got your logs. You've got the full logs for your app if you want to go look at the full logged up in the console or in a file, right? So the idea here is to try and give you something different to that, something more request focused, something that's kind of maybe colorized and super useful for, say, a bunch of debugging purposes, but not necessarily super useful for anything else, things like that, right?
Right.
Re-examine what we're doing here with a little bit of a slightly different focus and see how that goes.
So
and then, yeah.
One question that's come up, and I sorry to break the flow up here, and I don't know if you've covered this already enough, but several people have asked, how is this better than Postman, or how does this relate? Like, why is this useful to me when I've got Postman already?
Right. So Postman will be able to do a whole bunch of the things that this does. It'll be able to do a whole bunch of them, some of them better. And if you like visual stuff, it'll be able to do a whole bunch of visual things. It'll be able to do a lot more than this in that it'll have that whole testing focus that it has. You'll be able to store collections and pay for all of the cloud features that they have and things like that. What it will not be able to do is like this logs command. It doesn't know that it's a .NET application. It will not be able to deeply integrate with what you get as a .NET developer. So in this case, this logs command actually listens to the ETW events for my app. My application has the event source logger added to it, and so I'm going to be able to do things. For example, in here, you'll be able to see potentially a distributed trace where if I had web application 16 talking to web application 17, I would be able to see logs from both of them here when they talk to each other in the one like logs command, because I'll be able to trace my request that I made here through a couple of different apps to see the logs for them potentially. I'll see the logs hopefully in a nice format. We still have to play around with a bunch of that. I might be able to interleave events that come from the core effects, right? So because I know that it's .NET and I know that it's ETW, I can listen for all of the appropriate stuff that comes out of the framework. So when an error occurs, for example, I might be able to say, oh yeah, I saw a bunch of stuff that might be related to this, and maybe lets you type a command to see core effects ETW data just on the command line.
Right. Plus there's the whole thing of like, that is a tool, and I can always install developer tools, but this is nice for me that it comes along with the application. So any developer.
Yeah. So the other thing that the CLI will do, which you might have seen earlier, is when I control F5 my app, it actually opened up this shell instead of opening up the browser. So here, if I control F5, function key again. Here, if I control F5, then I get this shell open, right, by default, and I can just see my app and I can navigate around and I can do gets, right? So
that's
part of this
cool.
is
so
just like, why do we give you a browser when it's the least useful tool for you to explore your application by default in all of our stuff, right?
Yeah, right. So this is a more useful thing, and so that's cool that you showed that in case people had missed that. You can integrate that as a tool in Visual Studio,
absolutely.
right?
Yeah, and so and then I would imagine in VS Code you could make this sit in a window all the time and just be available, and you could just you can just be super focused on your API and just be like, oh, I'm working on this one, get, and then just change some code, up get, up enter, right, up enter, and my request happens, right?
Is there a way for me to extend or customize this as a developer? Like I could say, I know my application is doing this specific kind of thing with APIs, or I'm testing this one thing all the time.
Maybe. We have
a random idea.
So you mean like extending the tool to be able to kind of add your own commands or add your own behavior, right?
Yeah.
It's been asked a couple of times. We haven't done anything to kind of explicitly allow it right now, but it's not like off the cards, right? Like you could imagine. So the way this works is there's a program main, and in it has commands.add command class, commands.add command class over and over again. You could envision us saying, having some configuration that said, here's an assembly that contains command classes, and we would loop through that and call add on every one of them. And then that would let you kind of plug in your own commands, and you would have the types that the application, that the REPL gives you. I don't know that we would do that in the beginning, and I don't know, it's not necessarily on our list of features right now, but it's certainly possible. So that would be like, everybody throw us your cool ideas, right? This source code that I'm opening up is the program main for the REPL.
So in this REPL, it's implemented as a .NET global command, right? Yeah,
it'll be a .NET global command. So once we ship it, it'll be .NET tools install HTTP Repple or something, Microsoft HTTP Repple, and then you'll be able to .NET HTTP Repple or HTTP Repple. I'm not sure exactly what the command line exe will be when we ship it as a global tool. Right now, it's .NET space HTTP Repple because we ship it with .NET hyphen in front of the name. Whether or not that's true in the future, we'll see. And then in Visual Studio, over here, I went into here and I said browse with, and then clicked add. And then I went and added see, I have two different versions of this tool, the earlier prototype and the one Mike just did, which is this one. Select the exe that got generated when I installed my global tool, and then it becomes, for all intents and purposes, a browser as far as Visual Studio is concerned, which means that when you browse down here, you can say browse with, and you could choose Chrome or you could choose like a REPL.
That's a really cool extensibility thing.
So that's just kind of using this existing feature. This feature isn't perfect. We might play around with trying to extend this a little bit later, because it's kind of like, oh, for API projects, I'd kind of like it to be the REPL by default, and for everything else, I'd kind of like it to be, you know, my browser of choice by default. So I'm not sure that it's perfect just yet, but it's a nice extensibility point right now that we'll be able to use today without having to wait for like some new version of Visual Studio or anything like that.
Right. Somebody asked in the chat, is this scriptable? And I'm not even sure what. Yeah, I don't know what the use case would be there, but
I'm not sure what he means by scriptable. So get him to clarify, and then I'm going to run this command. Depends on what he means by scriptable. What is?
So basically, run a collection of requests.
Run a collection of requests, huh?
The L tab.
L, that's what you call this thing?
L logs.
There we go. So you want to be like, so you want to use it more like you would use curl or something like that, right?
Yep.
Yeah. So, oh, was I CDing into something? I was, right? Cool. Okay. Now let's run this again. So not really, because it's a REPL. So what I'm showing you here, like, so that is kind of like you want to say, so one of the things we're doing, which this command here does, it says run this like Glenn C documents logstream.script, right? Logstream.script is just a text file that contains a bunch of commands that the applicator exactly as you would type them at the command line, right? So in it has set base address, it has set header. You can see it echoing the commands it runs. So this is literally line by line what is in logstream.script. It says set base address to this Azure website, set this authorization header, and then it does a get against the logstream API. And so because the logstream API is streaming, what the REPL is now doing is actually streaming the logs from my Azure App Service logs log endpoint.
Nice.
So if we had actually deployed an Azure App Service, an app to this Azure App Service, and hit it, you would see the application logs appearing in here, and you can see how it said, "Oh, I've got no logs in the past minute." So as it's like streaming the logs into the REPL, right? So for your scripting question, you could kind of do it via this run command. I don't know. We don't have any real plans to like make it so you could call it in like a shell script over and over again with various arguments to make it work. It's not something we've really played with because we're focusing on the kind of REPL interactivity part of it right now. We're not trying to replace curl. But this is kind of this tool is like if you put curl and wget and Postman and Fiddler and like Wireshark in a blender, and you kind of hit blend and pour something out that has little bits of all of those, but not the full extent of any of them. That's kind of what this is. And it's kind of designed to get you a bunch of the way so that for a lot of your common tasks, you won't have to reach for those more advanced tools, but it's not designed to kind of individually replace any of them.
Right.
At least not right off the bat. Maybe eventually it will get closer to replacing some of them as it evolves over time, but at least not now. Cool. So one of the other things that's cool here is I did Control-C instead of what I wanted to do. I think just enter, right?
Yeah, like any keyword.
Yeah.
So actually fix the streaming thing always coming up.
Oh, nice.
So if you get latest, it'll actually do response formatting.
Cool. So document users. Going on.
Yeah, it doesn't like Control-C very much right now.
Cool. Okay. So let's do this. REPL, right?
Yeah.
Cool. So the logs command will go away now because I'm not running my branch, but run C users Glenn C documents L tab. Okay, so this is connecting once again and leaking all of Mike's credentials. what this lets us do is there's a few other interesting things. I'm connected and authenticated with the Kudu site of the Azure web app that has nothing deployed to it. If I can do things though, like get, what is it, API/processes. There's the processes that are running in my Kudu site, right?
Whoa. Oh, right, because those are just exposed.
Because they're just exposed once I'm authenticated to the Kudu endpoint, right?
Wow.
That's pretty cool. So, so another answer to like one of the questions about like what could I use this for is I have this goal, or one of the things I want to do before we ship this is I'd like to be able to do stuff like, set base address, set base api.github.com, right? And then this would be like HTTPS, right? Because that's what they do. And then like set user agent, set header user agent John, because they need a user agent. Set header authorization to be my access token, and then just browse the GitHub APIs and discover what I want to do with them. Pull back some JSON and then maybe copy and paste that JSON.
Okay. When you're using those set commands, those are just standard Windows environment variables, right?
No, they're commands for this REPL, for this shell, for this section of the REPL.
So are you showing, is that like pseudocode, or how is it?
No, it works. But this is like running, right? So this is the way this is what the REPL does, right? It gives us completion for.
Oh, right. Okay, sorry.
Completion for common header names and the ability to set them so that every request that it makes will set those headers first, right?
Right. Okay. And the indication there is that I'm in that REPL. I've got the URL and I've got the tilde there that's showing that's.
Yeah, and like we'll play around with this, right? Like this might act like a normal path. So as you CD around, it'll actually show the extra concatenation pieces, and we'll play around with the various experiences for this. There's some amount of command line stuff that we have to copy, right? It'd be nice to be able to say get /API/foo to test.log blah or something, right? And it would like execute API foo and then write the response out to test.blah.
Right.
Or maybe like 2 is the response body and 1 is maybe the headers, and then you can go headers.txt, and then you can go to like body.response.txt or something, right? Mm-hmm. So like that command doesn't work, but they're the sorts of things we're talking about as features of the future, right? So you can execute commands and see the results, pipe into files, do some of the things you would expect from something like curl or things like that.
So you're showing code that like you're just writing like last night and this morning even. Where is this something where is this at as far as people watching if they want to start playing with it or anything? Is it?
So we intend to put it onto the GitHubs at some point in the not too distant future. Right now, it's just in like Mike's GitHub account in private repos whilst he was started working on it. We'll make it public in the normal ASP.NET, one of the normal repos. Then it'll get built and put onto MyGet, and you'll be able to download it as a global tool, like as you can with any of our other kind of nightly stuff. That'll happen in the very, very soon, and then once it does, I'll kind of tweet about it, I guess, and you guys can see it. You'll see the new repo appear and stuff like that as well. Or if not a new repo, I suspect it'll actually just go into the existing repo where we have for other tools, like where .NET Watch lives, for example, and it'll just get turned into a tool as part of that. And so then in order to try it out, it'll be like, .NET tool install -g, and the ASP.NET MyGet feed. Something like that, and that would install it for you, and then you'll be able to play.
Okay.
Right.
So you're showing it's a global tool. You're obviously doing some interesting stuff as far as command line parsing. Is there? Can you show what you're using for the command line parsing stuff?
I'm sure Mike can give you a tour if you would like to see some of that.
I'm just curious because there's different ways of doing this, and I know we've got some better, kind of more formal ways of doing this recently, but.
Yeah, it's kind of dirty.
It always is, though. It always seems to be like that's a harder problem than it should be. But like if you want to show help and all that kind of stuff, right?
Yeah, so we have, oh my, let's see, we have, goodness,
Trying to click this folder
yeah,
and then look at this one.
yeah. So the parser, like the core parser, is actually defined in the sort of the base REPL thing. So you have the ability to sort of swap out parsers. And I think implements iParser of some parse result is acceptable for the core REPL. So essentially, one of the signatures is I take in string and a caret position so that I can actually isolate where the caret is within a particular section of parse text and just sort of peels through, figures out what are quoted regions, puts them together, that kind of stuff, returns a core result. If you want to do more interesting stuff with house parse, you can derive from this or implement your own or something like that. Actually talking with another team that wants to see if their command line parsing stuff can come in here and suit these needs as well. So the reason we haven't really jumped on one of the other ones that we have available to us right now is taking into account the caret position. So if you're part of the way through a term and you hit tab, like you should take into account what's before the caret when you hit the tab to figure out what the acceptable completions are.
Cool.
Yeah.
Is there? I've been randomly throwing questions at you. Did I let you get through all the stuff you'd wanted to demo?
Yeah, I guess. I think so. It's not super feature rich yet, so that's basic. We didn't run through all of the verbs, but you get the idea. So yeah, I think that's all the stuff. This UI command, if you have Swagger UI, will just pop the browser with Swagger UI in it. It's kind of cool, but my app doesn't have Swagger UI, so.
So what is, speaking of Swagger UI, like that's, in order to light up a lot of stuff, you need Swagger. So when I worked with you, I think I ended up just using NSwag.
Yeah.
Right. I pulled in the NSwag library.
Yeah, sounds great.
And that's kind of a.
Yeah. So in this application, I've been using iPull and Swashbuckle, but it doesn't matter as how you get the OpenAPI doc as long as you get one. It doesn't actually even matter if the OpenAPI doc is part of the app. Like you could give us an OpenAPI doc from somewhere else.
It could just be
some doc, right?
Yep. Okay.
So if you're kind of Swagger first, where you generate API docs and then you write code from that, or you generate code from that, then you could, connect to your API and then get the Swagger doc from wherever the Swagger docs are stored and things like that. And yeah, so however you get the doc, the tool just needs one if you want to get some of the features.
Okay.
Yeah.
So we had a question on how the header autocomplete works. I know you showed some of that, but.
So it's pretty for cheating. When you're in the header position, it looks at a hard-coded list of common headers that I got from Wikipedia.
Okay.
Yeah. So the set header command can accept arbitrary keys and names and values, and we just know of common ones that you probably want. That's all.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cool. Let me see. Of course, there's a question on, can I generate a client based on this?
Yeah, so we do have a client generation feature being talked about for 2.2. We hadn't talked about it being added to the REPL, but yeah, we'll see how that plays out, and then whether or not it makes sense when the feature gets kind of fleshed out more. I'm not saying no.
Very cool. Okay, so wow. So I think we talked about kind of where you're at and next steps and stuff. If there are things people watching are interested in, want to keep, have feedback or questions or whatever, what's good?
So right now you just have to kind of talk to me, the here you go guy who wants to see my ligature font.
Yeah, I love that.
The best way will probably be issues. They can talk to me on Twitter if they want. I don't know if Mike has a Twitter account, but if he does, yeah, he does. So
you actually follow me.
Do I? There you go. Yeah. And I'll find out what his Twitter handle is and mention him whenever someone talks to me about it. Once we move it into a repo, GitHub is always the best to kind of log issues and stuff on it. For now, because we haven't actually given it a final home yet, it's a little bit awkward. It'll probably be the tools, the repo in the ASP.NET repo that has the watcher and stuff in it already. So if you really want to ask drop a GitHub issue, you could probably go drop it there, and I'll find it. But I'll find it because Nate will tell me that it's there, and he'll complain because there's no code there to go with the issue yet.
And I keep saying this until someone tells me to cut it out. But if you're not sure where to file an issue, I think the general guidance is you can put it in home and it'll get routed or deleted if needed. But I mean, people will tell you, people will move it to the right place.
Yeah, we have a few people that kind of go through home looking for stuff. We also have the general issue for the 2.2 wave. So barring that, you could also kind of go and drop a comment there. Damien and I are both assigned as owners to it. We could probably have some sort of brief conversation there if you really want.
Great.
Yeah.
Well, I'm out of questions. I don't know if they're kind of petering down over here if people are asking about fonts and stuff. Is there anything else?
No, every time I've displayed my screen, someone has asked me about my fonts. And
it's funny. I use the same one and I forget to show it to people, but I really like it.
Yeah.
It's funny because I just get used to it, but those ligatures are really nice.
What I actually want is a ligature font that gives me this, but doesn't give me this.
Yeah.
That. Right. So like I love the Lambda, I love this. I'm not as keen on this, or in particular, that one's okay, but this. There was a font I used to use that had just a slight little break between these two. So they were closer together than a normal equals, but they were still separated. And so it was kind of like that, right? I'm still not sure about double equals, but everything else I like about it.
There's some interesting ones too with all the power line and some interesting. Actually, while we're at it, do you want to show? So in your console, you've got the power line stuff set up too, right?
Yeah, I do. Yeah.
So that's I don't know if that's new for people. Where did you go for info? You're using.
Yeah, I can't remember. I searched for like power lines commander or something. This is PowerShell. We're running kind of the power line stuff that you normally. It's using Oh My Posh, I think, which is kind of a clone of Oh My ZSH for PowerShell, because I use ZSH and Oh My George for Oh My ZSH on Mac and Linux, and I was looking to set up something similar on PowerShell on Windows, and that's how I ended up here.
That is actually really interesting for me because I've gone through and done it the thing where you follow a walkthrough and you feel like you're back in, I don't know, like trying to crack a video game in 2001 or something. It's all these 90-step things. Now install this, and then it doesn't work, and you're like, oh, that sucks.
Yeah. So Oh My Posh tries to put a bunch of that together in one go. It's still not so trivial, but it's not as hard as some of them. One other question was, any plans to add the facility to load test and endpoint straight from the REPL? Not right now. I think that's something. It's interesting. Like it's obviously possible. It's not inconceivable. I think for the first version or so, I probably wouldn't try and bake it in and just let you use the other tools that you have. But yeah, we could do that. I don't have a plan to do it right now, but it's not inconceivable, right? You could totally see how it would work. Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, I think this is a good spot to wrap up.
Excellent.
I'm a big fan. I was excited. I was nagging you to try and get set up to show this at that recent conference. I think it's really fun, and it's a great example of like wiring some things together. Like this is like global tools are really cool for lighting up. Like something I don't want to have to install with every application, something I'm solving the same problems over and over. This is great to be able to do. Yeah. And then I love kind of as you're going through the 2.1, 2.2 thing of kind of looking at what are common developer problems and common pain points, and kind of digging down into those, making my job easier. As I try and describe some of the like, here's why you want 2.1, and as from looking at 2.2, it's solving all these kind of common pain points, even down to like 2.1 with the quicker builds and stuff, right? It's just make my day easier.
Yeah, that's right. That's the idea, right? It's like I'd like to make it I'd like to make it further away before you have to go and reach for some of the other tools, like before you have to fire up the Postman Electron app or the Fiddler like thing. I'd like to move it a little bit further away, make it more accessible for people who are potentially new to programming as well. If the tool is just there and just available and they don't already know about this plethora of stuff out there, we can kind of have a more gradual linear learning curve for those people instead of like, okay, now I've pressed F5. Now go up here, go install all these things and find all this stuff, right? Eventually they've got to get there and they'll learn all that stuff, but do they have to learn it like in the first 3 minutes of learning of writing a .NET application?
Exactly. Like thinking through if I'm reading a doc, like getting started, I don't want a bunch of fetch quests of like, go install this, go get this tool. Now you need to learn this weird syntax for this other tool, all that stuff. It's great to be able to just say like, here's 5 steps of, getting this ready. And now if you want to go deeper, you can, but it's easier to start.
Yeah.
Awesome. Right. All right. Well, this was great. Thanks a bunch.
Thanks, everybody.
Now we need to do the dramatic zoom out.
Dramatic zoom out. Wow. Okay. This is an important moment. Dramatic zoom out. Ooh. Dramatic zoom out. So dramatic.